I'm the Executive Vice President and CEO of the USTA. And I'm joined on the other side of the camera by Allison Conte, our social media manager. Allison will be reading to me the live questions that come in during the session. So thanks very much for joining us, and I hope I can get to everything that you want to address. Towards that end, several of you were good enough to send in questions ahead of time, so I'm going to try to go through them right now, and we'll start with Moira Fanning. Moira, of course, is with the Hambletonian Society. I've known her for a few years. She sends in 7 questions, so we're gonna jump right into it. Number 1 is, what are the existing revenue streams of the USTA? And that seems to be a very popular question now as we head into the annual meeting and our budget review that'll be coming up during that time. The 3 major revenue streams of the USTA are membership, fees, and data. Membership, exactly what it sounds like. It's the dues that if you're a USTA member, that you pay to us for membership, and that includes track dues as well. Fees, that would be eligibility certificates, registration, transfers, list of mayor's bread, things like that. And data. Data is pretty much I think, kind of our core business in some ways, outside of being a customer service organization. Data would be our contract with Trackmaster. It would be Pathway. It would be several other deals that we have with institutional entities. Memberships account for about $1.7 million in fees. Excuse me, in budget. Fees come to about $2.9 million. And data comes to be about $2.4 million. So those are the biggest revenue streams. We've got some smaller ones, but the big ones are membership, fees, and data. And Moira's second question, what are the current assets of the USTA? Basically, our financial position is fairly strong, but perhaps not as robust as it could be given the current economic environment. We have cash and investments totaling about $7 million, which sounds terrific, and we're not complaining, to be sure. However, when you subtract deferred revenues, basically money that we've received for membership and for fees and for services that we've yet to perform, and we've got a pension liability of a couple $1 million, that brings our actual position down to about $2.6 million. So that would be our position. We do own our own building, and that's a very good thing. And we have no significant debt other than a pension plan that we truncated, actually ended, back in 1996, and that remains something that we look at on a regular basis as to when we'll be able to move on that. Make sure that we take care of everybody in it, but perhaps not have the liability ourselves. And again, that'll be discussed at the annual meeting by the pension committee and then brought before finance. Third one from Moira. What is the current membership of the USTA, and is it possible to grow it? Most recent numbers, got these this afternoon as a matter of fact. At the end of 2016, our membership stands at 16,604 individual members. That's a slight decline from 2015, when we were at 16,856. It's never good news when there is a decline. However, the rate of decline has slowed down considerably. We saw large numbers dropping off subsequent to 2008 and the financial crisis, 2008, 2009. You can kind of take a look at that. Look where it went into 2011, 2012. We were losing roughly 1,000 members a year for a couple of years there, and that's largely stopped. We've also seen some stabilization in those areas, those states, where slots-infused purses have provided a greater incentive for participation. Ohio numbers have stabilized. Pennsylvania numbers are pretty even. Basically where you would expect. Indiana, I guess I don't have them in front of me, but I think they would also be included under that umbrella. The follow-up question on that is it possible to grow the number? Yeah, I think it is, but we have to make this game as appealing as we can for people to get involved, because let's face it, if you're not involved in harness racing, there's very little incentive to join the USTA. So we need to attract people into the game, primarily as owners, but also as horsemen too, and there's some crossover between those two groups. So I'm not saying it's easy, and if you take a look at the other equine sports, their declines are somewhat similar to ours, but it can be done, for sure. Would you be in favor of reducing the number of directors or creating a different metric, and what is that metric, for directorship or representation? And if so, what? I'm probably not the right person to ask on this. It's don't want to fall back on I just work here, but I'm not a director. Right now we have 60 directors, and that's a number that always seems to take people aback, especially when I go to industry conferences and things like that. When I started here in 2008, we had 61 employees and 60 directors. We now have 48 employees and 60 directors. The directors, that number is specified by the bylaws, so any reduction or an addition, although I don't consider that likely, would have to come through a bylaw change. It would have to be approved by the board itself. Every couple of years, there is a suggestion that is made to reduce the size of the board. Most recently, it came at the November Executive Committee. I think it was Jason Settlemore who made that. And there's always a little bit of discussion, but I've never seen significant movement on it. So I don't consider that possibility to be particularly likely, at least in the short term. And hopefully I've answered that question, Moira. And believe me, I've been asked that before. So that's something that certainly has caught the attention of a lot of people, because the number is kind of striking. Most organizations our size have a smaller board. We have a larger one. Number 5, what specific standardbred aftercare initiative would you like to see implemented? I'm a big fan of the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance that is centered right now in Lexington, Kentucky. The TAA is a 501c3, and they inspect and award grants to facilities that, approved aftercare facilities that retrain, rehome, and retire, in that case, thoroughbreds. It has amazing buy-in from the rest of the industry. If you take a look at the names behind the TAA, seed money was provided by the Jockey Club and I believe the NTRA, but the biggest and some of the mid-size breeding farms all support it. There's a list of maybe 8 or 10 sales companies that support it. They have private donations. I went down and had several meetings last fall. I had one meeting with Stacy Clark Rogers, who is the director of the TAA. She walked me through how it was all set up and how they got their funding. And I also spent some time with the New Vocations people, and they do a marvelous job. And they showed me their new facility outside of Lexington before it opened. And they also are proponents of that model. I think I can safely say that. What it would take is to get it done on the standardbred side is buy-in from across the industry, because the USTA doesn't have the money to sustain that. We probably would have the money to provide some seed capital, I would think. And I know there are a good number of directors on my board that are interested in that. But at this juncture, it's going to take a whole heck of a lot more than that. It's a conversation that I think we're still going to keep having. And there are some people out there who are trying very hard, I think, to do the best that they can, and they do an admirable job. I mentioned New Vocations, but the Standardbred Retirement Foundation, those people are terrific too. And there are a lot of small rescues out there, including some that we have supported through our Standardbreds program that Director Don Marine advocated for and got launched about 7-8 years ago, and that our own Ellen Harvey helps administer. And that's been beneficial as well, but it pales in comparison in terms of size and scope to the TAA, and that's largely, I think, a function of involvement. Right now, it's the USTA, and over there with the TAA, it's far broader than that. But I think that's the model that I would advocate us to take a strong look at and see if we could do something along those lines. How much time do I spend traveling and talking with membership directors, clients, etc.? A lot, a whole lot. I added up how many nights I spent in hotel rooms last year, and it was something like 80, I believe. My wife Gail was saying that of the 52 weekends last year, I was gone probably half of them. So I'm out on the road a lot. I would say a good 30 to 40% of my job involves going to conferences, going to legislative sessions, going to meetings and events and things like that, and that's a great part of it. Really enjoy it. Gets tiring sometimes too, but that's part of the job on top of running the office here in Columbus. So yeah, every year I say I'm going to travel a little bit less, but every year there seem to be things that I need to attend, and fortunately I've got the support of the board in order to do that, and I've got a really good staff here in Columbus that allows me to do that without worrying that things aren't getting done here. So yeah, a whole lot of time, Moira, for sure. And last but not least, and I think Alan Levitt may have put you up to this, can we please have the trotting and pacing guide back, please? Trotting and pacing guide, for those people that don't know, has gone online. It's accessible for free if you have a Pathway account. Just sign on and take a look at it. It got to the point we had been printing it in hard copy, but the number of man hours required for the layout was just massive, and we weren't selling any of them. It didn't seem like there were that many people that were interested in it. Now, those people that were interested in it, they love it. It is near and dear to a bunch of people's hearts. We thought that putting it online, making it available for free, also would give us the added benefit of being able to update it, not in real time, but very close to it. A lot of times we'd send out the trotting and pacing guide, and records would be broken the week that we would send it out, and all of a sudden that information is obsolete, whereas now we're able to get things updated pretty much the next day. So that's a long-winded answer of saying that for economic reasons and for the practicality of being able to update on a rapid basis, I don't anticipate seeing the trotting and pacing guide coming back in hard copy form. And I am sure, like I said, there are a couple of people who feel very passionately about this, and I hear from them, and a couple of them are my friends, and I know I will continue to hear about that. Allison.
Mike, we have a question from Derek Gibner watching live.
Mm-hmm.
What is the benefit of joining the USTA?
What is the benefit of joining the USTA? The benefit of joining the USTA is that it makes the industry stronger. This is something where we can band together and address issues as a group rather than individually. I think right now, you take a look at I'm going to compare to the thoroughbred side, where the thoroughbreds have Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association. They have the NTRA that does a lot of marketing. You have the Jockey Club that's the registry. You have a bunch of other alphabet organizations that specifically address specific needs. We really don't have that here in the standardbred industry. The USTA is a big umbrella organization. I think it's important for people to have their voices heard and to work as a group as much as we can, and I think the USTA is the best place to do that. All right. Second question, and thank you, Derek, by the way, and it was good seeing you in Florida this weekend at Pompano. This one comes from Bruce in Toledo. What effect do social media sites such as, and I'll list some of them here, horseplop.com, Barn to Wire, In the Sulky, etc., have on the industry? I don't know that I can measure the effect that they have. I can tell you that there are a bunch of us here that read them on a regular basis because we need to know what's being said, even if those things that are being said don't necessarily flatter the USTA. And there's sometimes that because folks who post on these sites, some of them are actually kind of on the ground and in the trenches, there are pieces of information occasionally that we will pick up from them that we wouldn't normally know about. Now, the flip side of that is when the discussion gets nasty, and when it turns sour and becomes misogynistic or sexist or racist or anti-Semitic, then I think it's hurtful, and it's not something that I like or would be able to support. So it's a free country, and we all cherish our First Amendment rights, and people will make their own choices about that. We just do things a little bit differently here, but as I said, it's one of many voices out in the industry, and we do pay attention. Allison.
Shariel Musgrave, and I apologize if I mispronounced that, asked, when are they going to get horse racing back in Illinois?
When will horse racing come back in Illinois? That's tough. I believe Hawthorne has a limited number of dates that they'll be contesting this summer, and that's pretty much it. My understanding is that After the sale of Balmoral following the lawsuit, the Balmoral cannot be used as a harness racing facility or as a pari-mutuel facility of any kind. So Balmoral's pretty much gone. I'm not sure what the situation is with Maywood, but I would say that Illinois, which has a proud racing history, and you go back a decade or two and you see how strong it was there, they're having a tough time. And will likely continue to have a tough time. And we're grateful to see that Hawthorne has the standardbred dates, and we wish them the best of luck for a strong meet. And matter of fact, they have a newly elected director on the board, Jim Miller, who I know from my thoroughbred days, and Jim's a real good, real sharp guy. I look forward to working with him.
Jean-Paul Lavallee would like to know what the new president will do to bring people to the tracks, which I'm sure you won't want to speak on behalf of any of them, but what I guess we as the USTA can do.
What will the new president do to bring people back to the tracks? I think I don't know that it's the USTA's business to tell people, tell racetracks specifically how to run their businesses, but rather to offer as much help as we can give them. The best thing the USTA can do is to promote the good stories in the sport, try to address the problems in the sport, be the best record-keeping publicity arm, marketing arm that we can be. But it's tough. It really is. I mean, it's we've got in some ways a lot of responsibility, but not a whole heck of a lot of autonomy. And what might work for, say, the Meadowlands in East Rutherford, New Jersey, might not be as advantageous for Hoosier Park in Anderson, Indiana. And so those decisions, will largely be left up to those entities. There's been a lot of talk about a national marketing campaign for harness racing, and from what I've heard from all of the presidential candidates, marketing is something that we need to do more of. Paying for it is something we need to figure out. I know at least one of the candidates has talked about generating new revenue streams. Another candidate has talked about seeing money from slot-infused purses going towards a central fund. They're all bringing ideas to the table, and which ones we pursue will largely be contingent upon who is elected next week in Las Vegas. All right. Monica Reschke. Monica writes, the use of drugs, drug trainers, and beards, and what, if anything, the USTA and the new USTA president can do about this. It seems to me there is already a bylaw that would allow the USTA to take a more proactive stance against their use. Let me read the bylaw to which, it's actually a rule, to which Monica is referring. It's Rule 22.06, and it's entitled Participation by a Suspended, Disqualified, Excluded, or Expelled Person or Horse. Any member willfully allowing a suspended, disqualified, or excluded person to participate in a race, or a suspended or disqualified disqualified horse to start in a race shall be subject to a fine or a suspension. The other relevant wording in the rule book, and it ties into what I just talked about, comes in the preface. And the preface says that the rules governing the racing of horses at all pari-mutuel meetings in the various states and certain non-pari-mutuel meetings in at least one state are the rules of the applicable state regulatory bodies which promulgate and enforce their own rules. What that basically means is state rules trump USTA rules in almost every instance. We come up with rules largely because we govern fair meets, and also because the states look at us largely almost as a best practices, in a best practices way, to perhaps suggest what they should be doing, but they don't have to adopt them. Now, if a trainer, and we'll just use the example of say, a beard trainer, if someone were caught bearding based on 2206, they would be subject to suspension from the USTA, and I feel pretty confident that that would happen. But in terms of who has the autonomy over racing in the United States, that is the state racing commissions, and it has been for several decades now. The USTA was actually involved in a lawsuit back in the 60s, which it lost, and it basically said exactly that, that state rules trump yours. And so there you have it. Part two, though, the alliances and common goals and allegiances of almost every one of the USTA presidential candidates. As I look at the candidates, I see ties to two major racetracks, Meadowlands and Yonkers, one major breeding farm, Hanover, and one tied to the amateur driving segment of our business. In my opinion, only Freddie Hudson seems not to have an affiliation with the segment of the industry. My question is, what can the USTA do to help the president further the goals of improving the entire industry and not just the president's pet segment of harness racing? Couple of thoughts on this one, Monica. One is, since the board was designed to be comprised of individual industry participants, there are naturally going to be a whole bunch of conflicts, and that's just how this is at this point. You're going to have horsemen. You're going to have horsemen from different states. You're going to have horsemen who race at one track that is in close proximity to another. You're going to have track management. And as we all know, horsemen and track management don't always get along. So the phrase that I use is dueling constituencies. Short of completely abolishing the rule book and crafting an entire new set of bylaws that would stipulate that directors come from outside the industry, which is I could never see happening. I don't see a way around this. I will say this too. We're talking about the president's pet goals, and I don't know if you're referring to any particular individual, but the only president that I've known since I started here in 2008, well, up until Ivan Axelrod, who's the interim president right now, but has been Phil Langley, and I didn't see Phil pushing anything that could be construed as a personal pet project or something that would benefit Balmoral and Maywood, which is where he used to work. If anything, and I think that sometimes Phil tried to please so many people that it was challenging. I thought he really bent over backwards and tried to be fair. And obviously, perhaps I'm a little biased because I am fond of Phil and I enjoyed working with him for those 8 years. But stepping back as objectively as I can, and seeing what he went through, I didn't see him trying to take care of any particular segment. I thought he certainly had a track management background, but I thought that he understood horsemen's needs very well, and not saying that there weren't without conflicts in terms of arguments and things like that, but I didn't see that. I understand your question. I absolutely do. And I don't have an answer for you other than with 60 directors. I think there's a lot of checks and balances there. I think there are a lot of people that have some influence and can have their voices heard. And if they saw the president going too far one way or too far the other way, there would be noise, at the very least, in action potentially as well. So I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but it's the most honest one I can give you based on my position here and what I see. And anyway, additional comment, if I could, Alison. Let me go through this because this is pretty good. I thought Monica put a lot of thought into this. There are other issues plaguing our industry as it relates to the USTA, such as too many directors and the fact that ordinary members do not have a voice in the selection of the USTA president. The current method of calling the director in my district to let him know of my choice does not work. I did that. I was told the director was going to vote the way he felt and that he had already made his choice. My opinion was irrelevant. In regards to too many directors, the current number of directors is cumbersome and inefficient. How does anything important ever get agreed upon? No wonder the USTA does not address the industry's issues. The current management structure makes change a virtual impossibility. I guess the easiest thing then is to do nothing. That kind of thinking, though, I believe has put our industry in peril of extinction. And as the only organization in our industry, I believe the USTA has a duty to take the lead and give our industry a path that sustains our existence. A couple of quick thoughts. First of all, you're right. The USTA does have a duty and obligation to do that. That's got to be our mandate. Number two, I'm impressed that you called your director, which is what I've been encouraging everybody to do. And I've talked to a bunch of directors, and they've gotten very little feedback. So the fact that you picked up the phone or sent an email, very cool, and please keep doing that. As in American politics, as in our governmental system, if a director is not performing the way, or a congressman or a state senator or whatever, the way that you want, my advice is to vote against him, or try to run somebody against him. The problem that we have, and I'm not saying that the director was wrong, by the way, and keep in mind that he's got a bunch of constituents that he needs to report to, and he's going to vote, as the way that he thinks is best. But as with anything else, we need participation. And where there's participation, we get the government that we deserve. And unfortunately, participation in district elections at the USTA is, like local elections throughout the country, very light. So stay involved. Let people know how you feel. Let your director know how you feel. Let me know how you feel. Because I guarantee you that you'll get a response. It sounds like you already got a response from your director. But we get the government we deserve, and push hard for change if you don't think you're getting what you want. Allison.
Derek Givner would like to know, is it feasible for the USTA to expand its role beyond record keeping, publicity, and marketing? Can the USTA ever serve as a league office like other professional sports?
To serve as a league office, say like the NFL or the NBA, would involve the key participants, the track owners, the team owners in the NFL, for example, who give up certain rights and delegate them to an individual office. What complicates things a little bit even more on the thoroughbred side is that we've got a bunch of different governing bodies, a bunch of different state racing commissions. Every now and then, and this year is certainly one of those times, you will hear reports that there could be federal intervention, and there are people that want federal oversight of horse racing, harness racing, and feel that would streamline things, and maybe that's right. But I don't think it's likely that tracks will give up their power, that horsemen will suddenly say to do that as well. I'll give you a quick example. We had a breeding summit a couple of years ago, two summers ago, and there was somebody in the room who was a track official who was advocating for Derek, what you're suggesting. And I asked him afterwards, and this person said, yeah, I think the USTA should be making those calls. And I said, okay, well, what if, there's a person on your exclusion list, and I used a specific name, I won't use it here, but I did. I said, and that person's in good standing with the USTA or vice versa. What if I call you and say, hey, you rolled him off, but I'm telling you he's good to go there? And he said, well, we'd never agree to that. I think that's kind of it in a nutshell.
This question comes from Rob Ridoff, and I know we touched on it earlier, but if the USTA refuses to license someone, how are they allowed to race?
It's not a question of licensing. We offer membership, and there have been plenty of cases in which we've denied membership, and yet the individual has gotten a state racing license and been able to compete. In such cases, and again, this is a lawsuit again that goes back a couple of decades, we are not allowed to deny them services. It's essentially a restraint of trade. We have what is known as a Rule 1, Section 3. If you pick up the USTA rulebook or go online, look up Rule 1, Section 3, and it says that we do provide services at the same cost that a member would pay, but they're not granted membership. So there have been numerous instances where we have denied membership, but those folks have managed to get state licenses and compete, and it's vice versa as well. I've seen people come to us with state licenses and apply for membership, and we've rejected it. So it goes both ways, but we are unable to deny services. All right. This one comes from Russ Adams. Russ wants to know, how about a fair start poll at every track? Canada does it at all tracks, and so does Hoosier Park. I like the fair start poll. We don't have anything on the rulebook that addresses that. I know in Indiana it's positioned 330 feet before the starting pole. I think that might even be a little long. I'm not sure if that's the best spot for it, but I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. And I think it's helpful. I suppose there are a couple of things that that others have suggested and that I might agree with that could improve that. One was, as I just said, instead of 330 feet, maybe half of that, 160 feet. That could be tenable. And beyond that, perhaps stopping betting a good minute before the race goes, and that way you won't see the late odd changes that occasionally happen when a horse fails to make it to the start pole and there's still time to bet. Flip side of that is that racetrack managers who are right now, trying to maximize handle as best they can, would say that going that early would hurt them in terms of total handle if they cut wagering off. But I think it's worth a look. That'd be my opinion.
All right. This question comes from Jay Hochstetler watching live. How much longer is the contract in place with Trackmaster?
Trackmaster contract goes through December of 2020.
That's all we have for live questions right now.
Okay, well, I am out of specific questions right now from members. I will mention this because nobody really asked about the election. Maybe everybody knows about it, but the election for president will take place this Monday, February 27th, at our annual meeting this year. It's in Las Vegas, and I think it's going to be very important, possibly the most important election in the association's history. One question that's come in a bunch of times is with five candidates, does it take a majority to win, or does a simple plurality do it? And the answer is it's a plurality, whoever gets the most votes. If there is a tie, then there's a runoff election between the two, or maybe even three candidates, or four, or however many, who have tied with that top amount. They will assume their duties immediately. We also have elections going for chairman of the board and treasurer and secretary, and vice chairman as well. There's a three-way race for vice chairman. And having talked to all of the candidates, they all plan to hit the ground running if they're successful in their elections. So it's exciting. It really is. And I know that we've been paying a lot of attention to it, and we've been enthused by the number of people who wanted to get involved and who have said, hey, I've got something to offer, and here's where I think we should be going. So it's a good time right now at the USTA as far as I'm concerned, and I'm looking forward to working with the new officers that are elected. Anything else, Allison?
Nothing right
Any
now,
more?
so
All right.
signing off for this time.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you to everybody who tuned in and sent in questions. We aim to do this on a semi-regular basis, maybe every couple of weeks, and not just with me. I think you probably get tired of me pretty quickly, but with other members of the staff, perhaps with the new president when he comes on board. And again, any other follow-up questions, send them in to us here at the USTA or give us a call. And thanks, and have a great evening.